Thank you, Terry. I appreciate the opportunity to address your audience today and talk a little bit about my Capstone project. I'm confirming here I have control of the slides, and it looks like I do, so I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jacob Chorey. I'm in the Planning and Program Evaluation Unit of the South Carolina Vocational Rehabilitation Department. You see my contact information will be up at the end. The project that I conducted for the PEQA certificate program, the subject program, now I'm not able to advance the slides, Terry. Let me see if we can get this worked out.
Well, I don't know. I'll move that slide, Jacob, and then we'll see gap request. Yep, there we go.
Yep. Okay.
There you go. Yep. Okay.
So the subject program for my Capstone project was an information technology training center that's operated by our agency here on our state office grounds. We refer to it as the ITTC. At that program, we have agency staff who deliver training in computer programming, business applications, computer-aided drafting, and network and server support. It's a comprehensive program, and what that means is that we have lodging in dorms available, we provide meals, and we have on-site nursing available as well. So the purpose of the Capstone project was to evaluate the effectiveness of this program in delivering training that leads to competitive and integrated employment outcomes, and specifically in occupations related to the training that's received there. The evaluation questions were: 1, what courses are leading to successful employment outcomes? 2, how do participant outcomes compare to non-participant consumers with similar vocational objectives? That is, those who are pursuing the same types of jobs. And 3, what are the average program expenditures, and how do they compare to expenditures for general program consumers? Slide. The evaluation used a non-experimental design, quantitatively analyzing existing program data, which came from the case management system, Excel spreadsheets that are kept by program staff, as well as the agency's accounting system. There were 114 consumers served in the program during the study period, and that study period represented 3 state fiscal years, running from July 1st, 2015 through June 30th of 2018. The target group for analysis of outcomes data was 55 participants whose ITTC courses had ended and whose cases had been closed, whether successfully or unsuccessfully, by the end of the study period. A comparative sample of 2,150 agency consumers was identified, and that was made up of people who were not served by the ITTC, but who did have vocational objectives in common with program participants and whose cases had also closed during the study period. Slide. As far as results go, the Business Applications Plus course, which is the shortest course that we offer and served the most consumers during the study period, led to the most successful employment outcomes, as well as the highest proportion of successful outcomes related to the training that was received. About 85% of those successful outcomes coming from business applications were related to the training. By contrast, the computer programming course, which is the longest course we offer, had the highest rehabilitation rate, with 2 out of every 3 trainees achieving a successful employment outcome. However, only about 1/3 of those outcomes were related to the training. Average hourly wages at case closure for ITTC participants was higher than wages for members of the comparative sample with the same occupation. And expenditures for the ITTC consumers was on average 4.84 times those for consumers in the general program. Now, it's important to keep in mind that this is a comprehensive program, so costs were expected to be higher for ITTC consumers than the general population served by the agency. This project allowed us to see just how much higher the costs were. Slide. This slide concerns the immediate outputs of the program. So in the total column, that first column there with the black font, you see we had during this 3-year period a capacity of 122 seats available across all sections of the 4 courses that were offered. And of those 122 possible seats, we enrolled 114 consumers in them. So we were at the outset serving 93.4% of the capacity that we had in the program. As I conducted the project and we started looking at the data, I learned that during the following state fiscal year, after the end of the study period, it was becoming more and more difficult to fill those seats, and we had more vacant seats. And so, the overhead costs stay the same, but you have fewer and fewer people enrolling and being trained. And so that just became more of a concern from that standpoint. From among those who enrolled, you see that we had 66 who completed their course during this study period and 39 who did not complete. There were 9 whose course had still not ended at the end of the study period. So the completion rate overall for the program was 62.9%. And you see the additional columns breaks all these numbers down by the course. So a completion rate of 62.9%. The programming course was only 50, and the network and security support course was only at 44% completion. But if you go back to that issue of vacant seats or empty seats where we didn't have full enrollment, if you consider completers divided by the total capacity, we were only at 57.9%. So that was something that was noted and discussed among decision makers, managers in the agency. One other thing that we looked at was credentials that were attained. In light of our WIOA common performance measures, we were interested to see how many people earned a certificate or a certification as a result of the training that they received. And we had 38 of our consumers trained in the ITTC during this 3-year period earn at least 1 certification. Combined, those 38 consumers earned 67 total certifications, and all of them were in the CAD course or the network and security, server security course. Programming and business applications didn't result in any certifications. But those who did earn certifications, those of course would help with our measurable skill gains and our credential attainment measures under WIOA. Slide. This slide pertains to the longer term outcomes, the outcomes of the cases for those consumers who were served in the ITTC. So there were 55 cases closed from among those who were served during the 3-year period. And of those 55 case closures, 32 were status 26 or a successful employment outcome for a rehab rate of 58.2% program-wide. And if you go to the far right of the table, you see a column in pink for the comparative sample. The rehab rate for the comparative sample was 50.5%, and for the agency as a whole was 56.6. So from a rehab rate standpoint, the program did better than the comparative sample and the agency as a whole. As far as those outcomes being related to the training received, the rate there for the program as a whole was 68.8%. We highlighted that the programming course only resulted, like I mentioned before, in 1 out of 3 successful outcomes being related to training. That was a huge concern, and in fact, while I was conducting the project, the programming course was discontinued before I even finished the full analysis because of those concerns. As far as earnings and hours worked at closure, both of those were also higher for participants than for the comparative sample. Average weekly hours program-wide was 36.6, and the average hourly wage was $13.58. Again, the programming course came in behind the others for the average wage. that being another consideration to discontinuing that course. Slide. So one thing stood out to me as we considered the results of the project and what we had learned, and that was that we probably could have improved by having data collected on previous IT experience and training, both for the ITTC participants and for the comparative sample. That would have strengthened the analysis of the outcomes data. One of the implications of the evaluation findings is that the agency should not just assume that the program is still needed as designed, but should consider alternatives such as sponsoring training by way of technical colleges or other training providers. The ITTC was created decades ago in an era prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act, where it allowed access to training to people with disabilities who otherwise would not have been able to access that kind of training. Today, colleges and universities have disability services and provide needed accommodations, so the cost to operate the ITTC needed to be justified, and alternative uses of those resources needed to be considered. And in fact, about 2 hours ago, there was a meeting held just down the hall from my office to discuss what types of customized training and demand-driven training might be developed to use those same facilities. We have halted enrollment in our ITTC courses and are considering what is the best use of those facilities. So we're really looking to use our labor market information and identify those in-demand occupations where there's a gap in supply and demand, and see if we can develop some customized trainings to meet employer needs and get a better return on our investment and bang for the buck for what we're doing with that square footage and the overhead that we have. One final thought about my project. One thing I wish that I had done was practice the data analysis and interpretation using mock data. I think that would have helped in two ways. One, it would have helped me to be more certain of what types of analyses were appropriate and how they would answer the evaluation questions. And secondly, I think it would have put us a little further down the road than we are right now, because it would have allowed us to practice based on certain scenarios and what types of data we might find, what decisions would have been made had we found those results. So we're at the point now of still continuing to discuss, in light of what we found, what do we need to do? And I think had we gone through those mock exercises of coming up with some realistic scenarios to consider, if we find X, what will we do, versus if the finding is Y, what would we do? We probably would be a little bit further along right now in the planning in response to the findings. So I will look for questions in the box, and at this time, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Chris.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jacob. Just trying to see if I can click to advance the slides here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, like I say, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Claus. I'm with Missouri Vocational Rehabilitation, and I'm excited to share my capstone project with you all. Before I get into the details of the project, I know there's probably a lot of folks watching and listening today that are curious about PEQA and the certificate program, and I just wanted to kind of give a quick plug to the program. I know personally it's provided a great opportunity to learn some new tools, but also expand my network through not only the Summit Conference, but the PEQA project, really just getting to know people like Jacob and Elaine, who you'll hear from in a little bit, and Terry and Kate and Dr. Sue P. with the project has been a wonderful experience. So I encourage you all to really consider kind of actively engaging with the PEQA team. One of the other great things about the Capstone project is it really is an opportunity to make the project your own. I was able to kind of jump in with a program that we had been doing for a couple of years, and through this experience, I think I've really been able to understand it a lot better. And so I'm excited to share that with you this morning. So the title of my project is just the impact of early work experience on VR outcomes. And I'll talk through you kind of the overview here, just to give you an idea of specifically what I was interested in. So going back, WIOA was signed in the summer of 2014, of course, and pretty quickly thereafter, in the spring of 2015, here in Missouri, we developed and implemented a summer work experience program. And so I have here on the slide the literature review, just to remind us that there is going back, within the last decade, a fair amount of research that shows support in various settings for the positive impact that early work experiences have for students who are still in high school, in terms of how that has a positive influence on their ability to access jobs and other positive employment-related attributes after high school. So we knew when we were designing this program that we were building on the back of something that had some evidence behind it. And so with that, we really kind of dug in, and the program itself is changed a little bit since its first year in 2015. In fact, this year represented some of the most significant changes, but by and large, the what you see on the screen here is kind of how the program has functioned over the last 5 years. And so we really target VR. In the past, we had worked with VR eligible students, and now one of the changes we've made is moving forward is working with potentially eligible students. But for the sake of the analysis, these are all VR eligible students with disabilities who are entering their final year of high school. So kind of a traditional junior year, if you will, summer before the traditional senior year, I should say. We looked for students. We really try to prioritize students who haven't had any work experience, and we require that each of the work experience is in a competitive integrated setting. And we rely on our relationship with our CRPs to bring this program to life. So these are sites that are set up all across the state of Missouri in conjunction with our community rehabilitation program partners. The program itself is 16 hours of work per week with 4 hours of training. So we use various curriculum, skills to pay the bills. There's some other local curriculum that folks have adopted. So we try to make it a blend of real work experience with some time for folks, the students to process what they've learned throughout the week. It lasts 6 weeks. Students are paid minimum wage. And there are on-site supports, not in the traditional like supported employment sense of the word, but we do have support available at the site, at the employment site, and that's the CRP staff. So that's just a little bit of the structure of the program itself. So what I really wanted to know about was to learn more about how this program might be working and how we might be able to make it better. And so really, the purpose here is to better understand the mechanisms that underlie the summer work experience. So again, what is it? Are there things we can learn about how it's working now that we have 4 or 5 years worth of data to make it better? Anecdotally, it's been a huge success. It's been one of our most popular programs. We hear all the time about the positive impacts it's having on lives and communities, but we really needed to understand more about how it's working. So the question here is a big question, but the question I was asking myself through this project is, are those summer work experience participants more likely to exit VR with employment than those who don't? So that was like I said, a big question, just looking for that big impact. Kind of going up to the top of this slide, over the sample. So the data was collected in January of 2019, so a year ago. So that'll be the data that I'll share and report on. The top there, SWE participants, the percentages next to the years represent the number of cases that were closed as of January 2019. So that's why I chose to just include students with cases closed or students who participated in 2015, 16, and 17. 2018, at the time of the data collection, the number was really, really small, the percentage of closed cases, so I didn't include those. Kind of like Jacobs, this is a non-experimental design, or in sometimes people like to use the phrase quasi-experimental design, because there's no random assignment. So you'll see on the slide here, treatment group and control group. Students are not randomly assigned to services. So what I'm trying to do here is just derive an estimate of the impact of the summer work experience knowing that their random assignment wasn't involved. And so I'll describe a couple tools that I used here in just a second to do that. But still kind of looking at it from a treatment control group perspective. And the treatment group, of course, would just be those summer work experience participants. And the control group parameters, and I was using the 9/11 data set for data collection here. So I was at the mercy of those data elements that were available. And how I created the control group was as I looked at application date, and I looked at age of application, and then I looked at whether or not the student had an IPE. Again, at the time in 2015, 16, and 17, all the students were VR eligible, and this was a service that was provided under an IPE. So I did my best to back into a control group. One thing that's really important, and I'll talk about this at the end, is there was no way for me to specifically identify which grade the student had completed or was in. And so I think that had a pretty big influence on the data. To touch on the bottom right-hand corner here, the design piece, these are just two different tools that I used that I mentioned just a second ago are kind of, can be helpful when you have, lack of a random assignment where we can't just compare treatment and control group using descriptive statistics. But these are tools, linear probability models and propensity scores that really essentially just try to help us understand the relationship between successful outcome and participation in summer work experience. And I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail in just a second. Oh, went 2 slides. I need to go back one. I don't know if you can help me, Terry. There we go. I hope you can see this. These are just descriptive statistics. I realize there's a lot on here, but I'll try to hit the highlights. On the left-hand side, you have a variety of different variables. So at the top, we have just the percentage of students who achieved a successful VR outcome. So this is the classic, traditional, successful VR outcome. And then a variety of other demographic and mostly just demographic variables. And then on the left, you can see that the summer work experience participant group was there were 816 individuals in the data that I collected. And then there were 2,005 individuals using the parameters that I developed to create a control group who were not summer work experience participants. So you can see right out of the gate there, pretty surprising outcome, which is that actually 8% more of those non-summer work experience participants exited VR with a successful employment outcome. So that was quite honestly a little surprising. But again, the purpose of this project was not necessarily to judge it based off of that, but just to learn more about how it might be working. Another thing that really jumps out at me here is, and this kind of gets back to I think one of the problems I had is being unable to identify who are juniors and who are seniors or sophomores for that matter, because you can see the age group of the summer work experience participants is quite a bit lower. When you add, the age 16 and 17 together, we get 79% of the summer work experience participants were either age 16 or 17 versus 38%. So you can clearly see that a higher percentage of the non-summer work experience participants were older, which I think is a clue that something was going on with that element in terms of not being able to capture the grade level, so to speak. All right, so this slide is where, kind of going back to the beginning when I said, I use these tools to really understand, in spite of the fact that I have random assignment wasn't here. Essentially what probability models, and I have 2 different models that I've used here, are telling us is they're really used to explain variation between an outcome using different explanatory variables. So in the first model, I just have one variable. I'm just quite honestly asking, what is the likelihood of exiting VR if I participate in the summer work experience versus not participating? And you can see it's exactly what our descriptive statistics told us, 8% less likely. But then when I include various other demographic variables as control variables, essentially just to hold
Chris apparently has which can happen, apparently has lost his connection.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, you're back. Good.
Oh, sorry, I have no idea what happened.
Oh, that's okay.
I don't know how far along did I get?
You're at the propensity score quintile.
Oh, great. Okay. I'm so
I think
sorry.
wrapping up that slide, and then I'll
All
advance them for you, Chris.
Oh, my apologies. All of a sudden everything went blank. Okay, so yeah, so I was talking about the second model where I included on the linear probability models, where basically I just wanted to include some control variables, and that basically allows us to hold certain values constant, and all things being equal, try to replicate a random assignment setup. And as you can see, it didn't really change much. We still have a pretty significant, strong negative association with the summer work experience participation, which of course, like I said, is interesting. So moving to the right side of the slide here, with the propensity score uses some of the same principles as linear probability models, but really wants to try to look at across the distribution. You know, how does the difference matter? No, is it happening on one end? Is there an impact happening on one end or at a certain point in the distribution? So by looking across the entire distribution, we can really kind of get a better picture. And so what propensity scores does is it just estimates, the propensity score just means, you know, based off of the characteristics of the people who participated in the summer work experience, what is the likelihood that a person would be a summer work experience participant just based off of their characteristics, and then assumes and then acts like that person was a summer work experience participant. So basically we're kind of artificially creating a treatment and control group just based off of all these demographic characteristics. And you can see here, we see some very similar, we kind of get a similar story across the distribution, that those non-summer work experience participants are exiting at a higher rate, which like I said, was unexpected and quite interesting. So if I'm still here, Terry, you can advance to the next slide. Okay. So kind of what some of my takeaways were based off of what I've learned is, there we go. Obviously, we see just from the data that the way I set the project up, we don't see, you know, those positive outcomes that we expected. But to be perfectly honest, I mean, it doesn't make any sense that adding something like a summer work experience would cause or worse in outcomes. It kind of defies logic to think that. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bad connection signal again. If I drop out, I apologize. So I think we kind of needed to look more closely at the design limitations to see if there's something going on there. And that's where I think we see a lot of the issue. And particularly, I'm going to jump down to the design limitation section, the last bullet point, where we talk about gap in time. I think one of the things that was a problem with the way this was set up is that there's this huge amount of time that happens from the time that the student completes the summer work experience till they're even eligible to exit VR. And so I think that makes causality a tough sell. So it's in other words, it's really hard to say, you know, a student participated in a program that ended in August and it caused something to happen in May when we knew there were 100 million different things that happened between August and May that could have also had an influence. So that has allowed us to really focus on looking at, you know, well, what is it that's going on between the summer work experience and that senior year? Are there ways that we can dovetail the summer work experience into other work-based learning experiences that happen, and really try to take that momentum that's developed over the summer and grab a hold of it? And I think if we're able to do that, I think we'll be able to see a different story coming back, because we do know, like I said, anecdotally, that a lot of momentum is created through this summer work experience. I don't think that we're really capturing that as effectively as we can. And I think through going through the process here, I was able to really get a better picture of that and understand that. And so if you want to jump to the last slide, Terry. So what that means for us is that moving forward, we're going to really take a look at what are some things we can do possibly differently with our summer work experience program to build into that, to capture that momentum, so to speak. With this slide, I just wanted to add a couple things because I am not a program evaluator in terms of the role that I play and the day-to-day work that I do. But I also wanted to shift gears just quickly to let folks know that a big part of what I've learned through this Capstone project and also through the training is the value of what we call evaluation capacity building. And so just as I'm speaking about a very specific project that I think we've learned a lot about and will help us moving forward, there's a lot to be said about just understanding the role that evaluation can play within an organization. And so we're at a pretty exciting time here in Missouri where I'm fortunate enough to work with a wonderful and amazing quality assurance team. Tim Gravier, I believe, is out there. He's the director of that team. And I think a lot of the team members are on the line too. But also we have we're really developing a feel for how program evaluation fits in Missouri. What does that mean to us? It's more than just doing a specific project, but it's more about how do we bring that in and as a mindset, and how do we make that a part of lots of things that we do, not just specific projects. So I just wanted to share that it sparked some really great questions that you can see here on the screen. And along with Kevin Miller, who's also, I don't know if Kevin's on the line, but one of our other team members here at VR, we've really had some great conversations, and I'm excited about where we're headed with program evaluation here in Missouri. So with that, before I drop again, I will go ahead and stop, and I'm happy to answer questions that pop up there at the end. So I guess at this time, I'll turn it over to Elaine.
All right, thank you, Chris. Coming in, doing this last, I just have to echo what both Chris and Jacob have said. As far as appreciating everyone attending the webinar today, and also what this program has brought to me in my position. The slide says I'm interim director. I'm no longer interim director. We do have a new director, but that's been exciting here because it's giving me an opportunity to actually utilize a lot of the program evaluation skills that I've learned throughout the PEQA program, as we really need to do thorough evaluations on several of our programs to start making change moving forward and helping us to prepare for an upcoming RSA monitoring visit. So there's just a lot of things that this program has really given me the tools to be able to be more help to the new commissioner and to senior staff at the agency. So that being said, my project was, in our agency, we use Aware Case Management, as I'm sure many of you do. However, it's a very basic version. And so we're in the process of modifying and customizing our case management system. And along with that, making sure that we are looking for and tracking all of the data required by the RSA under WIOA. The old case review system didn't do that. So my project was to do a study to begin developing that VR case review instrument that would measure the data that the RSA is now requiring. It doesn't look like I can forward them, Terry. Thank you. So my design was to create an instrument that would effectively measure the performance data, pave a pathway to change in the way we collected data, and to drive creation of a consistent training program, especially for our front-end and counselor staff who use the case management system. The purpose of it was to develop and validate the instrument so that we can increase our federal compliance with WIOA, because we knew a monitoring visit was coming. So some of my questions were, what are the WIOA performance indicators pertaining to case documentation? And is the case review instrument that I was developing reliable and valid? So I began by reviewing materials. I looked at the MTAG monitoring guide put out by the RSA, did a mini RSA monitoring visit within our agency, answered all 156 questions, collected all the data, and just reviewed what it is that we need to have. Then I looked at what are we missing, looking at what they're looking for, looking at our current materials and our current process, what are we not getting? So then I went in with a very basic, from the needs assessment, a very basic of, okay, this is what the RSA wants. Do we even have a way to track it? And did just individual case reviews that I'll talk a little bit more about later. Then I just made some tweaking, made some changes, and I looked at, I got information from a couple of other states as well. I looked at monitoring visit reports from Florida and Michigan and developed the actual case review instrument. Next, I utilized that along with our supervisors, with our trainer, and with our program director to do more in-depth case studies, which I'll go into next. So this is what I just already said. I'm not really sure why the slides are separate, but okay. So on the needs assessment, I also conducted a survey of our VR counselors. We are a small agency, so we have 16 counselors, 13 counselors, 3 supervisors, and I did a survey, a 10-question survey to find out what their needs were. How did they feel about the data entry they're required to do, the amount of data entry, how it was set up, and the way that we were requesting information? Because I needed to know where I needed their input to help develop this tool. Then I conducted a focus group with the VR supervisors and the program director to get their perceptions on the quality of the documentation. What were they looking for? What did they need? After that, I took and just did a simple review of 10 cases just to determine if we were able to collect, if we were collecting the RSA data, because we didn't know at that point. So what I did was I broke it down into 4 categories in creating it. And the first one was the quality of counseling services and documentation. It's very easy to just go in and fill out check boxes or fill out blank boxes, you know, those simple questions in AWARE and then just a box with a sentence or 2, but you're not getting the quality information. It's not telling the story. And we weren't collecting information on documentation of benefits. Were we referring consumers to benefits counseling? This information wasn't there. Evidence of informed choice was not always there. The comprehensive assessment of VR needs that's required by the RSA now, not always there. So then the second section looked at the quality of vocational preparation, goal, training, and placement. And again, these are your basic RSA performance measures on vocational exploration, labor market information, measurable skill gains. Were the consumers referred to an employment consultant? Was job placement information in the file, including wages? Quality of closures. Were we in compliance when it was closed successfully? Was there sufficient documentation and sufficient review if a case was closed without employment? And then looking for compliance with regulations, laws, and policies. Were the timelines met for eligibility and IPE? Were all the signatures in place and dated correctly, both in AWARE and in the hard case file? Were comparable benefits documented? Did expenditures follow policies? Were all goods and services that were provided included on the IPE? If transition or supported employment case, did all documentation follow the policies? I gave it a simple rating scale. 1 was minimally or not in compliance, that multiple important aspects were omitted. And number 2 was mostly compliant. The majority of the important aspects were completed, and the omissions may have been mild to moderate impact. And number 3, it was compliant with no major omissions. And then there was an NA because not every case ended in employment, not every case was transition. So I had to give the option on certain questions to let us know that it didn't apply. So using the case review instrument that I developed with those 4 categories, I sat down with the 3 regional VR supervisors, the VR Consumer Services Director, and myself. We pulled 20 cases, both hard copy and electronic file. We reviewed all 20 cases and we double reviewed them. When one person was done with it, they passed it on, another person reviewed it, and then the 2 reviewers talked and communicated to come to a consensus, especially around quality, because there's a lot of perception involved. We tweaked it a little bit at that point. I made a few changes, a few different questions, just based on feedback from that case review. The counselor trainer then did an electronic only review of 77 cases, and I assisted in that and then compiled that data using the new instrument. And then when looking at the compliance rate, whether it was mostly compliant or compliant. So with the team review, we had 100%. We had to be in 100% rating agreement in the rating scales, checking for that interreliability. The case review results with all 97 cases in total were analyzed and computed with the compliance rate of either mostly compliant or compliant for each item. As you can see, everybody was great at the medical and eye report in the file. We did pretty well on the IPE at 89.7. Eligibility at 74.2 is below the RSA standard. And then things went downhill from there. Part of this was our system is not able to track it. It doesn't have the checkboxes enabled, or it doesn't have the modifications, but this helped us to identify that for moving forward. Part of this resulted in, okay, where do we need to train? Because counselors obviously are not documenting everything that we need documented. So then, that helped us inform where we were moving forward, but it also showed us where our deficiencies were and what we needed to work on in order to really be prepared for an RSA monitoring visit. Next slide, please. So what this has done is created a path for development of training. And yesterday at our senior management meeting, we confirmed that we now have a training schedule set up. We have actual trainings that have been developed to take counselors through each step of the case management. And next week, actually, we're doing our first training on the pre-ETs because we want to make sure that our staff is fully informed on pre-ETs. Being a small agency, it is difficult to spend that 15%. But we now have that training developed, getting ready to actually deliver it. The instrument's just another tool for counselors, supervisors, and QA so that we can target specific areas now. We can take that tool, a supervisor can, or a counselor can even use it when they're going through a case and audit their own cases to make sure that they're putting the data in there. It's not just for measuring data, it's also for teaching. Case documentation procedures within the AWARE system are being revised to reflect needs. We just did a budget proposal asking for additional state funds, one-time state funds, to help us make some modifications, and we were able to really justify that because of this process through PEQA. And then increased use of the instrument will ultimately increase agency compliance with federal performance indicators, which was the ultimate goal. But on top of that, it will also improve the confidence of our counselors. It will improve morale. It will improve the fact that we are being more consistent across the board, because we do only have 116 employees, but we're spread across the entire state in 8 different offices. So it can sometimes be difficult to make sure that that consistency is there. So the future implications of this and what we're starting with these trainings is we're ensuring that every training also provides a desk reference guide that will assist these counselors, because we are so spread out. We're hoping that our budget request of an additional staff person to do just case reviews and join QA will also give us the opportunity to do targeted case reviews monthly. Obviously, the modification of AWARE will assist us in streamlining and greater accuracy. And then the implementation of that consistent case review is just going to give us a better overall agency performance. Is that the last slide?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'd like to thank you all, and back to you, Terry.
Thanks. And actually now I will turn it over to Beth Gertner to direct questions in the time we have remaining that came up during the session. So go ahead, Beth.
Hi, everyone. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to try and get through these as quickly as possible. But just so you know, if there are any questions that we don't get to, we will make sure to ask panelists to respond, and we'll send out the written responses in an email. So just so you know, in the event we don't get to a question, we will follow up via email. All right. So Jacob, I know that you answered at least 1 or 2 of these, but just in case other members of the group have them as well, I'm going to just review all the questions that were posed to you really quick. So the first one comes from Matthew Queen, and also I apologize if I butcher anyone's name. So this is for Jacob from Matthew, and the question was, were any prerequisites required for any participant prior to entering any of the courses?
So as far as prerequisites, what we were really looking for is just that the consumer was pursuing employment for which the training offered would be relevant. So they had an established vocational objective. It was in a field for which that training would help them attain and maintain employment. Other than that, we just wanted to know that they were committed to coming to the program and had an intention of finishing, because they are long-term trainings. The duration is anywhere from 4 to 13 months, depending on the course and the section, what holidays fall in the calendar, and that sort of thing. So we wanted a commitment that they intended to complete, and that they intended to pursue employment that would be related to that training.
Alrighty, thanks, Jacob. On to the next one. This one comes from Stephen. What criteria were used to determine who received the specialized services? And you did follow up with that one, and your answer was selection was based on the vocational objectives of the consumers and what skills/training were required by employers to achieve those objectives, as well as their willingness to commit to a long-term training program. And then I know there was some follow-up between you and Stephen as well.
Yeah, and Stephen offered to touch base afterward and discuss in a little bit more detail what he meant by his question, so I can reach out to him and have some further conversation.
Perfect. All right, Jacob, those are all of your questions. Next on to Chris. This one comes from Cindy Murdoch, and says these are eligible VR clients versus recipients of pre-employment transition services. So
that's correct, yeah. And for those included in the analysis, we have since changed our criteria, and now we are working with students who are potentially eligible as well. But in terms of who is contained in the analysis, those were all VR eligible students, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the next one comes from Jeffrey Miller. By successful outcome, is that an employment outcome, eventual employment outcome, or employment outcome at age 16, 17, or 18?
It's the traditional VR successful employment outcome. So it would be the outcome for that case, that particular VR case. Yeah.
And from Amy Howell, were females evaluated in the study? It has males listed on one of the slides, and she was curious to see if females were also included.
Yes, that was just an effort to save space. The male category was larger, so I only included that percentage, yeah.
Alrighty. And from Carl Cooper, did you have students drop out of the program, and did you include dropout statistics in your analysis?
Yes, we absolutely have had students drop out. I only included completers, for the lack of a better phrase. So I was able to look, and I included students who I could tell had completed the summer work experience. And I did that based off of paid authorizations, because that's a service that we authorize to our CRPs. So if it didn't look like a student completed the full summer work experience, I did exclude them.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Those are all that I have for you right now. Elaine, we have 2 requests for you to share a copy of your case file review instrument. Meredith and Rhonda are both interested in taking a look at that.
That's fine. They can shoot me an email at the end when they get our contact info. If they want to send me an email, I'll be happy to share that with them.
Perfect. All right. And then we have a question from Tim Stump asking, are you thinking of including 504 students? Tim, I'm not 100% certain who you're directing that to. Chris.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was not necessarily a factor in terms of an exclusionary factor. So there were, I'm sure, students that were 504, receiving 504 services through their school district. So again, we only were looking at students who were entering that final year of high school, had a VR case, had an application date range that fell within the same range as our summer work experience students. And then, oh, there was one more, I'm blanking. But for the lack of a better, the short answer is yes, those students were included. They were not excluded.
All right, thanks everyone. Those are all of the questions that I have right now. And just because we've hit 11:30, I'm gonna cut off questions. The webinar will be available to watch again. That question just came in from Shannon. I will repost the link to the archived webinar. And if you have any further questions, please follow up with folks when you get their contact info. Terry?
Great. Thanks, Beth. You know, somehow we overlooked in the presentation, Jacob and Chris and Elaine, if you would put your emails in the chat box now, we'll leave the piece open. I realized in all the materials we neglected on our end to make certain that that contact information was available. So that would be great. And we'll leave it up. And again, we'll also include that when we post the materials, etc. And if you have any questions, contact us here at SVRI and we'll get you that information. Must be the bridge between Minnesota and Wisconsin. Oh, that Matt Markby, he's on this? Oh, no. I thought I excluded him from registering for these. So that's, again, to reiterate what Beth talked about, and we said it a couple times, but it is beneficial. Tomorrow you'll get an email with the evaluation form, and if you're interested in CRCs, there's a box at the end of the evaluation form. Again, we've repeated it and Beth just answered it. This will be posted on the PEQA TAC site, pequatac.org, and it will be available for future viewing and will be available for future CRC if by chance you have somebody else in your agency that is interested. If you've registered for this, when we have our next webinar, you'll get a notice of that. And with that, I'll leave the site up for a bit, but I want to thank Chris, Jacob, and Elaine. Wonderful presentations. As always, makes me think of some things I need to take a look at as well. And for those of you that are on, if there are any particular topics, spin-offs of these presentations or other topics that you're interested in, you could put it in the chat box, or you could drop us an email at SVRI, or put it in the PEQATAC.org website if there's some additional webinar topics you would like to hear about. So with that, I'll bring an end to the session, and thanks everybody for attending. Have a good day. So yeah, Jacob, you and Elaine and Chris, you don't have to stick around unless you'd like to. Otherwise, like I said, I'm gonna leave the site open for a while if people are copying down your email addresses.
All right. Thanks, Terry.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Terry.
Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Elaine. And actually, even for you as well, Beth, if there's something you need to get onto, I can monitor the site for the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. All the stuff in Q&A has all been answered, so if there's anything new that's added.
Okay. Could you do one last thing? Could you copy and paste the QA, copy the QA questions out of the QA box and drop into a Word file?
Yeah, I already did that. So I'll send that to you.
You're way ahead of me. Actually, send it to Jen.
Okay. Will do.
Thanks. Nicely done. Appreciated it.
All right. I will talk to you later.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.